When I look back to where I started, when I first started the journey of becoming an acupuncturist, I mean, looking back now, I was probably the least likely person you would ever imagine becoming an acupuncturist. In fact, when I told my friends and family that that's what I was planning to do, they almost laughed. It was like, what, you? My journey had started at the age where I started training. I was living in San Francisco, and my focus then was on making money, being successful, having a nice home, having the California dream. And various situations led me down the route of suddenly ending up in an acupuncturist treatment room. And I was there not because I was interested in acupuncture. In fact, I was totally skeptical about it. I was there because two of the guys that were working for me, who were pure Californian dudes, couldn't understand why I was so obsessed with coming to work on time. So we came to this agreement that I would chill out a bit, and they suggested I go and see this acupuncturist, and in exchange for that, they would try and come closer to the time. So I came from this very rigid mindset of, everything has to be a certain way, and I entered into this world in the 80s in California where everything was a bit softer. So I went reluctantly along to this acupuncturist, and I remember him asking me all these questions about my life and just thinking, this is nonsense. And then he was needling me and so on. And I left there thinking, well, okay, I fulfilled my part of the bargain, and I hope these two guys will too. And then the next morning, I remember waking up and looking out of my window with my cup of coffee and my cigarette, as we did back then. And two buses went by, and I remember thinking, that's strange. They look very different. And then I looked down the road, and the road looked different. And I suddenly had this weird experience of seeing everything very differently. Now, at the time, I didn't link it to the fact that I'd had my first acupuncture treatment at all. In fact, I then went back into work, and I remember sitting at my desk thinking, I actually don't like this business. I don't know why I'm trying to make these people come into work on time. I don't know why I'm interested in selling airline tickets to people. And this whole process started happening where I started to see everything differently. That led on to me closing my business, moving back to the UK and training as a psychotherapist. Again, something I would never have thought of doing. But looking back on it, I didn't give credit to this one-off treatment that I'd had. And then I went back to San Francisco to visit some friends, having moved back to the UK, and something inside me said, oh, go and have another treatment. And I remember going along and having a similar kind of experience after that, where it was like the cogs were starting to move within me. So what I'm trying to share with you here is that the process of becoming an acupuncturist is not just this sudden spontaneous idea of, I'd like to help people. I want to work with getting rid of people's symptoms. It is a process of change that happens within us. And that is an essential part of being an acupuncturist. It sounds a little bit self-centered, but it is an important part of the journey that we find our own personal way as we help people find their way. The other reason I'm telling you my personal story is that when I started seeing an acupuncturist in the UK, and at that time I was still training to be a psychotherapist, I was a bit disillusioned with the psychotherapy, and I was a bit lost. I was in my late 20s. And she said to me, well, why don't you become an acupuncturist? I think you'd be good at that. And I remember thinking, she's crazy. I couldn't do that. I'd become a convert, basically. From those first two treatments, I had suddenly given it a much higher status. I suddenly seen it as something that I didn't understand. I knew it had, at that point, had some effect on me, but it was something way beyond my reality. And when she said I could do that, I remember thinking, impossible. And what I want to say to anyone watching this who's considering it, this is a way of life, a job that anyone can do if you enter into it with the right spirit and you have the right teachers and the right support. I then went on to go to the college in Leamington that was headed by Professor Worsley. And I remember in my first week there, suddenly thinking, oh my God, there's a professor who's head of this place, and our teachers were mentioning having gone to Oxford and Cambridge. And I remember thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here then. Maybe this is far too academic, far too clever for me. But the reality is, what I learned very quickly is it was the opposite. That it does not require any form of academic training. It is not an intellectual process, quite the opposite. And my teachers who were there had come to it because they were exhausted from being in that more Western academic kind of thinking and were seeking something much more organic and natural and something that had more meaning. So that was the beginning of my process. Since then, I've practiced for almost 30 years. I've seen thousands of patients over that time, and I've taught probably a good few hundred people, and if not more, in postgraduate. So for me, it has been a big part of my life. What I want to share with you is what I've learned about what is needed to be a great practitioner. And I would hope that if you're thinking about doing this, or if you are doing this, that you aspire to be the best there is, because it's a huge responsibility to sit in a room with another human being and to operate as this vehicle or this mechanism for this person to not only improve in health, but to evolve as a human being. The way that this tradition has lasted through time is as an oral tradition. It is a lineage. It is an imparting of wisdom, a sharing of accumulated knowledge and experience that goes from one generation to the next. And it does follow in the master-apprentice tradition, meaning that we have to learn from our teachers. This is not something you can just pick a book up and read, or even watch these films and then think you have it. It's not about collecting information. Everything that we're taught in this system of medicine is there as signposts to stimulate something inside of us so that we can then have our own internal process, that we can have access to the natural laws and the way that nature works, and then use that in a proactive, tangible way to help other people. So what does it take to become a great acupuncturist? And it is important to aspire to be the best so that we can serve nature in the best possible way. So I've had my own experience. I've seen how other people have struggled, how they've succeeded. I've paid attention to the times that I've run away because it's too difficult or too boring. But I'm going to share with you a list that I have just to go through so you have an understanding of what you might expect in this process. So, what does it take? Well, the first on my list is humility. It takes an enormous amount of humility. In my first 2 years of practice, I came out of college and I built a great practice. I had lots of patients. People loved the treatment, people got better. And after about 2 years, I thought, oh, this is a bit dull now. It's all too easy. And I basically ran away with a sense of real arrogance that, I've kind of mastered it in 2 years. And then when I came back and had this kind of calling to come back to it, I asked one of my teachers to come and see patients with me just to get some help with starting up again. And she diagnosed all my patients differently. And it was the most enormous moment of realization that I had somehow taken on something and believed that I was greater than this ancient tradition that takes years and years to learn. So humility is required throughout. The real meaning of humility is to acknowledge that there is something greater than us. There is something mystical and magical out there, and we're talking about nature. We understand a certain amount about the workings of nature, but not everything. That is the pursuit of science, is to make sense of this incredibly profound and inspiring, awe-inspiring thing that creates all life. Curiosity. We have to be curious. Human beings are coming to us. They're coming to us because they want help. Sometimes they don't know what the kind of help they need. What gets them through the door is a pain in their shoulder or maybe a headache. But we have to be curious. We have to find out who they are. Why have they really come? What's really going on? What is their history? We have to be curious about how nature is manifesting within them. And this is absolutely essential that we maintain that curiosity, which of course is rooted in humility. Curiosity is a question. I wonder what that is. I wonder who this person is. I wonder what the diagnosis is. So that has to remain throughout. What's kept me in the business for 30 years is that I'm curious about, can I get better? I'm curious about how I can help people more and more and more. I'm curious about developing my skills, the skills that are needed for diagnosis. And it's a wonderful feeling, curiosity. There's a freshness and lightness to it. Integrity. Walk the walk, talk the talk. This is a commitment to take human beings into your world and to take on the role as the acupuncturist, the 5-element acupuncturist that is going to help them. It requires real integrity. It means showing up in the fullest sense of the word. It means being responsible in how you interact with your patients, but also how you are responsible to yourself as an instrument, which is what we're going to talk about that later, but to really have that personal integrity and the integrity with the work you do with the patient. Patience. This can be exasperating. There are real definite learning curves when you're becoming an acupuncturist. Often you have the honeymoon phase when you first start, and everything feels quite easy, and the patients come back and they all love you and their symptoms are going away. And then suddenly you plateau and not much is happening. And then you maybe even dip. People don't come back. They cancel their appointments. They're not getting better. And this is when you have to be patient. It is a natural part of the journey. You have to accept that you are going to learn something, you're going to unlearn it, and then learn it again, and unlearn it and learn it again. And this process never stops. It's the idea of spiral learning, is that we keep coming back to the same place and we learn something new about it. In this system, there is not a huge amount of information. In fact, in these films that you're going to watch through the modules, you will have all the information, but you need to revisit it and you need to be patient to wait for the pennies to drop more and more and more as time goes on. Openness. We need to be open. We need to be open to the person who's in front of us. We need to be open to all the possibilities of what might happen with them, with us as a practitioner, and also to build rapport with the patient, for them to feel that they're safe with you, for them to feel that you are open to whatever they may bring. Some people bring very dark stories to us, they bring shameful things to us, sometimes they bring wonderful things to us. And we need to be able to be open to that, to allow room for everything that happens that the person brings to us. Commitment. This is a real commitment. I realized this when I did my running away after 2 years. I, for some reason, didn't think anyone would really care. I thought, okay, they've all had treatments, I'm sure they've benefited in some way. And when I disappeared, I didn't realize that people saw it as a commitment. I didn't realize that people had invested in the relationship with me, that they had invested in my knowledge about them, that they had confided in me. So it is a commitment. We have to take it very seriously. It is a relationship that you have with the person. So you have to commit. And if you decide that you're going to not commit any further, you have to take the appropriate steps to look after them in that process. Passion. This really doesn't work without passion, and passion comes from the heart. And my next word is love. Love and passion. You have to love what you do. The system of medicine is teaching us about the core principles of life, which is that love as an energy, as a force that rises from within us and colors the world. We're helping our patients find that for themselves, to find the passion for who they are, for their life, for the people around them. Therefore, we have to manifest that. We have to be passionate about the work we do, passionate about learning new things, passionate about recognizing when we can't do it. It's a key ingredient. Kindness. We need to be kind, firstly, to ourselves, because it's a lifelong learning. It's very easy to pick up a stick and beat yourself with it and say, I can't do this, this is too difficult. So you must be kind to yourself in the process. Often the times that we're really struggling and we doubt ourselves are the times that we are open to our patients through our own kind of vulnerability and humility, that somehow they feel they can connect with us. So the kindness, the sweetness to ourselves is important. And of course, that also translates to the patient, to be kind to them, no matter what they tell you, no matter what you personally feel about them, but to have that sweetness and kindness with them at all times. Courage. It takes an enormous amount of courage to be a 5-element acupuncturist. It is a journey, and you're going to meet many, many obstacles along the way. And one of the biggest obstacles is thinking you can't do it, or thinking that you know it too well. There are many, many hurdles to jump. So we need the courage to do that. And we need to have support from other people, from teachers, other practitioners. We need to know that this is a complex route. And you're going to have many, many different kinds of patients coming with many, many different stories. So we have to have the courage to keep going no matter what. The last one I've got here is to walk on the edge of mystery, which is partly the thing I said about arrogance, is to accept from the beginning that we will never know this completely, that we will never fully understand what's going on, that when nature tells us to do something with our needles, we don't need to know the depths and the complexities of what happens as a result of that action, that we are there to serve, that this is a mysterious process. We enter into the world of mystery. And that's what liberates the patient. If you recognize that we are taking part in magic, you could say, or the mystery of life, the person with you feels that, and they can enter into that more liberated and fantastical state. So becoming an acupuncturist is not about an accumulation of knowledge. It is about waking up to yourself, waking up to the world, and waking up to all the patients that come to us. And then it's about helping that individual wake up to the truth of who they are. So as we go forward with the lectures, the philosophy teaches us that each human being is a unique manifestation of life. We are all small cogs in one big wheel. That's the oneness of Chinese medicine. But we must acknowledge and value the uniqueness of the individual in front of us. And that is essential that we keep our attention on that. If we get distracted by the story the person tells us or the symptoms they come with, we're missing the real reason they're there. As 5-element practitioners, we're involved in a spiritual tradition. Our job is to acknowledge the uniqueness of that individual and assist them in bringing that into the world. I've got a few quotes here from the Neijing. The Neijing, the Huangdi Neijing, is the ancient text that is the foundation of this system of medicine. And it's incredible how the things that are written in this text that was originally spoken about 5,000 years ago, written about 3,000 years ago, applies to today as much as it would have done back then. So here's the first quote. If we can observe how all life is at work, this is the first level of knowledge, to have the consciousness to observe the natural order and find it in oneself and in another. So this text tells us immediately that everything that we need to know is found outside in nature. For us to observe how all life is at work. This means nature. How does life actually work? The seasons, the elements. So our first role is to go out and see nature like a child did, or as we did as children, is to open our senses and be curious. I wonder why. Why does it look like that? Why is it that color? Why does it smell like that? So in this system of medicine, the first thing that we're focused on is developing our sensory skills to be able to see, to hear, to smell, and to feel. This is absolutely the foundation of this system. You cannot learn this stuff in books. You have to be in the world and you have to start waking up your senses and using them. We have to have an intimate relationship with the seasons. The seasons are ever present. As each season comes around of each year, we have an opportunity to learn about that season. It's nature teaching us about the natural order of life and the multiplicity of experiences that we can have in life, all found in the seasons. We need to understand what rapport means. Rapport, to be in rapport with yourself, means to be at one with yourself, to have an intimate relationship with yourself that is free from all the nonsense of the superficial emotions and ideas that we have about ourselves and other people. It's about having a deep personal relationship, a peaceful relationship with who we really are. And then we have the curiosity again, humility and mystery. This is what the classic texts are telling us to do, to get out in nature and learn about reality. This is the next quote. If you do not have a good relationship with yourself, you are unable to have a relationship with another. Now, this is quite a challenge. This comes early on in the text, and it is telling you very clearly that you better get your shit together before you start thinking about helping someone else. What it's actually saying is that we have to recognize there is a difference between when we're serving someone as what we call an instrument of nature versus the messy you. So I come with all my stuff, my prejudices, my preferences, things that I think I know. All of my normal personality is one thing. That's me. What we have to do if we're going to serve another human being is be able to take a gear change and step outside of ourselves and become an instrument of nature. And the way that we do this is by sharpening our senses. By becoming a sensory being, our attention goes to our senses and away from our thinking mind. A lot of our personality, our thoughts, and our opinions come from the mental process. It comes from the mind trying to work things out and drawing conclusions that come far too early. So all we have to do is recognize the difference between being me in the world and me as an instrument of nature. So one of the great things about being an acupuncturist, a 5-element acupuncturist, is that when you walk into your treatment room and you sit down in front of your patient, you recognize that you are there to serve them. The person that has a problem with a neighbor or a problem with paying a bill or any of our day-to-day problems is left outside of the room. And in that space where I'm with my patient, I look into their eyes, I'm at one with them, and I understand that my role is to serve them. And that is a peaceful role. That is a role that we all strive for, really. We try to escape the problems of life. And as a practitioner, that is your job. Your job is to know the difference. And the upside of that, of course, is that as you are there helping another human being and being at one with them, you are becoming more and more familiar with who you really are, separate to all the problems that come from your crazy mind. So we benefit by being practitioners. That's not the primary focus, it's a side effect of being of service to another human being. So when we have rapport with ourselves, we're able to observe our own behavior. It is possible to know who you are and to watch yourself in action. And this is an interesting process. This is also something we're helping our patients do. The more that they come back into balance, the more that they operate from a profoundly authentic place within, they can see their thoughts, they can see their own behavior, and then they're in a position of changing that should they wish to. So the next quote from the Neijing. Become what you are as a human being, and it will be good for your patient. Healing is not nursing or mothering. So this emphasizes the same point again. Become a human being, become who you really are. Tidy up your side of the street, as the expression goes, and it will be good for your patient. What it means is, ultimately, there isn't a messy you outside of the room and an instrument, that the two of you become one, and that is the ultimate goal. And then it says, very importantly, healing is not nursing or mothering. This means our job is not to care for the patient in the way that we associate with nursing a child or mothering. Our job is to help them be who they are. Our job is to serve them. And the way that you are with every patient will be different if you are there serving them and nature is telling you what that person needs. We now move on in the classics where they actually talk about the treatment. And in this section, they say, needling is like looking at a deep abyss. Take care not to fall. Your hand must be like a hand grasping a tiger. One desires a kind of firm strength. Here we come the mystery again. This image of standing on the edge of the abyss is kind of dangerous. And if you imagine standing next to your patient, when they come to you and they lie down in front of you, and you now have your needle, and your responsibility is to effect a change in them that nature has told you to do. This is where the mystery is. The problem with Western thinking is that we immediately take ownership of this role. So we say, I'm an acupuncturist, I have a needle, and I am going to effect a change in this patient. This is not what's happening. If you effect a change in the patient, that means that you are using your will, your intention, whereas what we need to remember is that nature is instructing us. And when nature instructs us, because it is mysterious by nature, we enter mystery. So again, this emphasizes the humility. Recognize that we really don't know what's going on here. And that's why we are mere servants to nature, that we have no idea who this person is going to become, what's going to happen in their life. Because very often we have an idea about how we think someone should be. We start advising them based on what we think they need. And what the classics are telling us is, no, this is a mystery. This person's life is a mystery to them and especially to you. And the last one, which is one of my favorite quotes, great healers get straight to the point, they waste no time. So even though nature has its own time and it's a process, what the classics are telling us is that we as practitioners need to be on the ball. We need to know how to make a diagnosis. We need to sharpen our senses to do that. We need to know how to find the acupuncture points, how to feel the pulses, and also how to be the instrument and get rapport with ourselves and the patients. So becoming an acupuncturist is a way of life. It is a personal process. It's a massive responsibility because you have to pay attention to what's going on with you at all time. You are always learning. There is no end to this. Even though you may do a 1-year course, a 3-year course, or a 10-year course, that is simply part of an ongoing process. 30 years in, I'm still learning. Every time I talk about this, I learn something. Every time I see a patient, I learn something. And as I said before, the learning curves are difficult. It can become very, very painful to be in the kind of the wilderness of not knowing what you're doing. But you have to be patient and wait till you come back. One of the most important things is that this process is not a lonely process. Becoming a great acupuncturist is about good communication with colleagues, interacting with patients in a way that is meaningful, and understanding that you have entered into a lifelong profession.